and still the gump flew onward, carrying them they knew not where. "I must have left the pepper box in the jackdaw's nest," said the Scarecrow at length. "It is a great misfortune," the Tin Woodman declared, "but we are no worse off than before we discovered the wishing pills." "We are better off," replied Tip, "for the one pill we used has enabled us to escape that horrible nest. Yet the loss of the other two is serious, and I deserve a good scolding for my carelessness," the Scarecrow rejoined penitently. "For in such an unusual party as this, accidents are liable to happen any moment, and even now we may be approaching a new danger." No one dared contradict this, and a dismal silence ensued. The gump flew steadily on. Suddenly Tip uttered an exclamation of surprise. "We must have reached the South Country," he cried, "for below us everything is red." Immediately they all leaned over the backs of the sofas to look, all except Jack, who was too careful of his pumpkin head to risk it slipping off his neck. Sure enough, the red houses and fences and trees indicated they were within the domain of Glinda the Good, and presently, as they glided rapidly on, the Tin Woodman recognized the roads and buildings they passed, and altered slightly the flight of the gump so that they might reach the palace of the celebrated sorceress. "Good!" cried the Scarecrow delightedly. "We do not need the lost wishing pills now, for we have arrived at our destination." Gradually the thing sank lower and nearer to the ground until at length it came to rest within the beautiful gardens of Glinda, settling upon a velvety green lawn close by a fountain which sent sprays of flashing gems instead of water high into the air, whence they fell with a soft tinkling sound into the carved marble basin placed to receive them. Everything was very gorgeous in Glinda's gardens, and while our voyagers gazed about with admiring eyes, a company of soldiers silently appeared and surrounded them. But these soldiers of the great sorceress were entirely different from those of Ginger's army of revolt, although they were likewise girls. For Glinda's soldiers wore neat uniforms and bore swords and spears, and they marched with a skill and precision that proved them well trained in the arts of war. The captain commanding his troop, which was Glinda's private bodyguard, recognized the Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman at once and greeted them with respectful salutations. "Good day," said the Scarecrow, gallantly removing his hat, while the Woodman gave a soldierly salute. "We have come to request an audience with your fair ruler." "Glinda is now within her palace awaiting you," returned the captain, "for she saw you coming long before you arrived." "That is strange," said Tip, wondering. "Not at all," answered the Scarecrow, "for Glinda the Good is a mighty sorceress, and nothing that goes on in the land of Oz escapes her notice. I suppose she knows why we came as well as we do ourselves." "Then what was the use of our coming?" asked Jack stupidly. "To prove you are a pumpkinhead," retorted the Scarecrow. "But if the sorceress expects us, we must not keep her waiting." So they all clambered out of the sofas and followed the captain toward the palace, even the Sawhorse taking his place in the queer procession. Upon her throne of finely wrought gold sat Glinda, and she could scarcely repress a smile as her peculiar visitors entered and bowed before her. Both the Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman she knew and liked, but the awkward Pumpkinhead and the highly magnified Wogglebug were creatures she had never seen before, and they seemed even more curious than the others. As for the Sawhorse, he looked to be nothing more than an animal chunk of wood, and he bowed so stiffly that his head bumped against the floor, causing a ripple of laughter among the soldiers, in which Glinda frankly joined. "I beg to announce to your glorious highness," began the Scarecrow in a solemn voice, "that my Emerald City has been overrun by a crowd of impudent girls with knitting needles, who have enslaved all the men, robbed the streets and public buildings of all their emerald jewels, and usurped my throne." "I know it," said Glinda. "They also threaten to destroy me, as well as all the good friends and allies you see before you," continued the Scarecrow. "And had we not managed to escape their clutches, our days would long since have ended." "I know it," repeated Glinda. "Therefore I have come to beg your assistance," resumed the Scarecrow, "for I believe you are always glad to succor the unfortunate and oppressed." "That is true," replied the sorceress slowly, "but the Emerald City is now ruled by General Ginger, who has caused herself to be proclaimed queen. What right have I to oppose her?" "Why, she stole the throne from me," said the Scarecrow. "And how came you to possess the throne?" asked Glinda. "I got it from the Wizard of Oz, and by the choice of the people," returned the Scarecrow, uneasy at such questioning. "And where did the wizard get it?" she continued gravely. "I am told he took it from Pastoria, the former king, said the Scarecrow, becoming confused under the intent look of the sorceress. Then, declared Glinda, the throne of the Emerald City belongs neither to you nor to Ginger, but to this Pastoria from whom the wizard usurped it. That is true, acknowledged the Scarecrow humbly, but Pastoria is now dead and gone, and someone must rule in his place. Pastoria had a daughter, who is the rightful heir to the throne of the Emerald City. Did you know that? Questioned the sorceress. No, replied the Scarecrow, but if the girl still lives, I will not stand in her way. It will satisfy me as well to have Ginger turned out as an impostor as to regain the throne myself. In fact, it isn't much fun to be king, especially if one has good brains. I have known for some time that I am fitted to occupy a far more exalted position. But where is the girl who owns the throne, and what is her name? Her name is Ozma, answered Glinda. But where she is I have tried in vain to discover, for the Wizard of Oz, when he stole the throne from Ozma's father, hid the girl in some secret place, and by means of a magic trick with which I am not familiar, he also managed to prevent her from being discovered, even by so experienced a sorceress as myself. That is strange, interrupted the Wogglebug pompously. I have been informed that the wonderful Wizard of Oz was nothing more than a humbug. Nonsense, exclaimed the Scarecrow, much provoked by this speech. Didn't he give me a wonderful set of brains? There's no humbug about my heart, announced the Tin Woodman, glaring indignantly at the Wogglebug. Perhaps I was misinformed, stammered the insect, shrinking back. I never knew the wizard personally. Well, we did, retorted the Scarecrow, and he was a very great wizard, I assure you. It is true he was guilty of some slight impostures, but unless he was a great wizard, how, let me ask, could he have hidden this girl Ozma so securely that no one can find her? I give it up, replied the Wogglebug meekly. That is the most sensible speech you've made, said the Tin Woodman. I must really make another effort to discover where this girl is hidden, resumed the sorceress thoughtfully. I have in my library a book in which is inscribed every action of the wizard while he was in our land of Oz, or at least every action that could be observed by my spies. This book I will read carefully tonight, and try to single out the act that may guide us in discovering the lost Ozma. In the meantime, pray amuse yourselves in my palace and command my servants as if they were your own. I will grant you another audience tomorrow. With this gracious speech, Glinda dismissed the adventurers, and they wandered away through the beautiful gardens, where they passed several hours enjoying all the delightful things with which the Queen of the Southland had surrounded her royal palace. On the following morning, they again appeared before Glinda, who said to them, I have searched carefully through the records of the wizard's actions, and among them I can find but 3 that appear to have been suspicious. He ate beans with a knife, made 3 secret visits to old Mombi, and limped slightly on his left foot. Ah, the last is certainly suspicious, exclaimed the Pumpkinhead. Not necessarily, said the Scarecrow. He may have had corns. Now, it seems to me his eating beans with a knife is more suspicious. Perhaps it is a polite custom in Omaha, from which great country the wizard originally came, suggested the Tin Woodman. It may be, admitted the Scarecrow. But why, asked Glinda, did he make 3 secret visits to old Mombi? Ah, why indeed, echoed the Wogglebug impressively. We know that the wizard taught the old woman many of his tricks of magic, continued Glinda, and this he would not have done had she not assisted him in some way. So we may suspect with good reason that Mombi aided him to hide the girl Ozma, who is the real heir to the throne of the Emerald City, and a constant danger to the usurper. For if the people knew that she lived, they would quickly make her their queen and restore her to her rightful position. An able argument, cried the Scarecrow. I have no doubt that Mombi was mixed up in the wicked business. But how does that knowledge help us? We must find Mombi, replied Glinda, and force her to tell where the girl is hidden. Mombi is now with Queen Ginger in the Emerald City, said Tip. It was she who threw so many obstacles in our pathway, and made Ginger threaten to destroy my friends and give me back into the witch's power. Then, decided Glinda, I will march with my army to the Emerald City and take Mombi prisoner. After that, we can perhaps force her to tell the truth about Ozma. She is a terrible old woman, remarked Tip with a shudder at the thought of Mombi's black kettle, and obstinate too. I'm quite obstinate myself, returned the sorceress with a sweet smile, so I do not fear Mombi in the least. Today I will make all necessary preparations, and we will march upon the Emerald City at daybreak tomorrow." The Tin Woodman plucks a rose. The army of Glinda the Good looked very grand and imposing when it assembled at daybreak before the palace gates. The uniforms of the girl soldiers were pretty and of gay colors, and their silver-tipped spears were bright and glistening, the long shafts being inlaid with mother of pearl. All the officers wore sharp, gleaming swords and shields edged with peacock feathers, and it really seemed that no foe could by any possibility defeat such a brilliant army. The sorceress rode in a beautiful palanquin which was like the body of a coach, having doors and windows with silken curtains, but instead of wheels, which a coach has, the palanquin rested upon two long horizontal bars, which were borne upon the shoulders of 12 servants. The Scarecrow and his comrades decided to ride in the gump, in order to keep up with the swift march of the army. So, as soon as Glinda had started and her soldiers had marched away to the inspiring strains of music played by the royal band, our friends climbed into the sofas and followed. The gump flew along slowly at a point directly over the palanquin in which rode the sorceress. "Be careful," said the Tin Woodman to the Scarecrow, who was leaning far over the side to look at the army below. "You might fall." "It wouldn't matter," remarked the educated Wogglebug. "He can't get broke so long as he is stuffed with money." "Didn't I ask you?" began Tip in a reproachful voice. "You did," said the Wogglebug promptly, "and I beg your pardon. I will really try to restrain myself." "You'd better," declared the boy. "That is, if you wish to travel in our company." "Ah, I couldn't bear to part with you now," murmured the insect feelingly, so Tip let the subject drop. The army moved steadily on, but night had fallen before they came to the walls of the Emerald City. By the dim light of the new moon, however, Glinda's forces silently surrounded the city and pitched their tents of scarlet silk upon the greenswards. The tent of the sorceress was larger than the others, and was composed of pure white silk, with scarlet banners flying above it. A tent was also pitched for the Scarecrow's party, and when these preparations had been made, with military precision and quickness, the army retired to rest. Great was the amazement of Queen Ginger next morning when her soldiers came running to inform her of the vast army surrounding them. She at once climbed to a high tower of the royal palace and saw banners waving in every direction and the great white tent of Glinda standing directly before the gates. "We are surely lost," cried Ginger in despair, "for how can our knitting needles avail against the long spears and terrible swords of our foes?" "The best thing we can do," said one of the girls, "is to surrender as quickly as possible before we get hurt." "Not so," returned Ginger more bravely. "The enemy is still outside the walls, so we must try to gain time by engaging them in parley. Go you with a flag of truce to Glinda and ask her why she has dared to invade my dominions and what are her demands." So the girl passed through the gates, bearing a white flag to show she was on a mission of peace, and came to Glinda's tent. "Tell your queen," said the sorceress to the girl, "that she must deliver up to me old Mombi to be my prisoner. If this is done, I will not molest her father." Now, when this message was delivered to the queen, it filled her with dismay, for Mombi was her chief counselor, and Ginger was terribly afraid of the old hag. But she sent for Mombi and told her what Glinda had said. "I see trouble ahead for all of us," muttered the old witch, after glancing into a magic mirror she carried in her pocket. "But we may even yet escape by deceiving this sorceress, clever as she thinks herself." "Don't you think it will be safer for me to deliver you into her hands?" asked Ginger nervously. "If you do, it will cost you the throne of the Emerald City," answered the witch positively. "But if you will let me have my own way, I can save us both very easily." "Then do as you please," replied Ginger, "for it is so aristocratic to be a queen that I do not wish to be obliged to return home again, to make beds and wash dishes for my mother." So Mombi called Jellia Jam to her, and performed a certain magical rite with which she was familiar. As a result of the enchantment, Jellia took on the form and features of Mombi, while the old witch grew to resemble the girl so closely that it seemed impossible anyone could guess the deception. "Now," said old Mombi to the queen, "let your soldiers deliver up this girl to Glinda. She will think she has the real Mombi in her power, and so will return immediately to her own country in the south." Therefore Jellia, hobbling along like an aged woman, was led from the city gates and taken before Glinda. "Here is the person you demanded," said one of the guards, "and our queen now begs you will go away, as you promised, and leave us in peace." That I will surely do, replied Glinda, much pleased.